All right, welcome everyone. Hope you're having a good day so far on this Wednesday afternoon. We're going to learn a Rashi from the fourth Aliyah. Fourth Aliyah of Vayera, so many different stories in Vayera, so many important stories in Vayera. In the fourth Aliyah, towards the beginning of the fourth Aliyah, we see the destruction of Sodom, the saving of Lot, and unfortunately the incest that exists between Lot and his daughters, which results in the birth eventually of the progenitors of Ammon and Moab, those two nations which dwell to the eastern side of the Yarden, which continue to become a part of the history of the Jewish people later on, of course, with Ruth and her inclusion as well. But after that incident, after the saving of Lot and his family, the Torah tells us that Avram distanced himself further from Lot. If you remember last week, we had the Rashi that told us on their return from Mitzrayim after the famine, they go to Mitzrayim, they come back to Israel, and they have to part ways with each other, seemingly over economic reasons. And Avram says to Lot, "Im hasmo ve'emina ve'im hayamin ve'esma'ila," you go left, I'll go right, etc. We saw the Rashi there, which indicates that actually the left and right was simply meant to inculcate within Lot the fact that Avram was telling him he would never be too far away from him. He would never truly leave him. He would actually be there to protect him, to guard him, to stand up for him, and he would maintain the family connections even though they were parting ways with each other. And we see that come to fruition in last week's Parsha, and again in this week's Parsha, exactly in this incident of Avram coming to basically rescue Lot or intercede with Hashem on Lot's behalf in order to save him from Sodom. But unfortunately, after all those positive overtures, all those positive gestures, all those desires to save Lot, Lot still goes in an even worse direction in terms of the incest with his daughters. And therefore, the Torah tells us now, Vayisa Misham Avraham Arza HaNegev. Avram further distanced himself. He travels from there to the land of the Negev. Vayeshev ben Kadesh uben Shur Vayagar bigrar. He dwells in the area between Kadesh and Shur, which is the area of Gerar. And from there, the whole story of the interchange between Avram and Avimelech occurs, because he goes into the area of Gerar. Again, he lies about his wife. His wife is said to be his sister. Avimelech takes her, and then he gets afflicted and he gets upset. Why didn't you tell me? In the end, it results in the bris between Avimelech and Avraham, beautiful bris in which Avimelech recognizes the power and stature of Avram Avinu and the future that he would now have with his child Yitzchak, and therefore they create a bris. After that bris comes the experience of the Akedah. All these stories are connected one to the other and really actually do flow one from the other. But what I wanted to analyze today is the Vayisa Misham, Avram traveling away, seemingly from Lot or from the area of Sodom and from its destruction. So why is he traveling away? Is this what it seems to be, which is on the surface a further distancing from Lot? If you remember the last time when he seems to distance himself from Lot, he's not really distancing himself. The pasuk is actually telling us he's willing to stay close. This one, the pshat of the pasuk, seems to be he's leaving him. Direct result, right? It's juxtaposed to the whole story of Lot and the incest. And the very next pasuk is Vayisha Isa Misham Avram. Avram travels away from there. The pshat of the pasuk, you might conclude, is Avram wanting to distance himself from Lot. So is that the case or not? The Rashi gives two interpretations of Vayisa Misham, trying to help us understand the motivation of Lot leaving this area. Number one, Kshera shecharvu hakrachim upasku haovrim v'hashavim nasalo misham. When he saw the destruction of the whole area of Sodom, and he saw that people ceased to travel through that area. When an area is destroyed, it's not fruitful anymore for visitors, for the economy, for travelers, and so they take a different route. Once there were no more people traveling through that area, he left. Beautiful, beautiful Rashi, which is telling us that Avram's whole mission in life was to help people, was to guide people, was to bring people closer to monotheism. And he planted himself in that area because it was a very rich economic area. We know that till today. The lowlands of the Dead Sea, that whole area of Sodom, is very rich in minerals. It's rich in many ways. It's a passageway from different countries coming to and from. And therefore, it would be a logical place to sit, sort of at the juncture of many roads in order to be able to attract people and to teach people and guide people like he wanted to do. Once people were no longer there, Avram had no reason to be there anymore. It wasn't that he wanted to leave Lot in this interpretation. It wasn't that he was troubled by the destruction of the area or his lack of ability to sustain himself in that area, although you might have concluded that, right? That could have been one of the interpretations. But Rashi's not saying that here. Rashi, in this first interpretation, is saying it has nothing to do with the destruction per se. It has nothing to do with Lot's behavior per se. It has to do with his mission in life. He had one singular focus, and that is to help reach out to people. Once people were no longer there, he had no purpose in being there. He moved to a place that was more populous. That's interpretation number one. However, Rashi has a second one. Davar acher, another interpretation of why Vayisa Misham Avraham, Lihisrachek Milot. Here Rashi confirms our suspicion. In the second interpretation, Rashi does indeed say that Avram was doing this in order to distance himself from Lot this time. The first time he doesn't want to distance himself. He slightly distanced himself, so they have different territories. There's no more fights between their shepherds, but he stays close in terms of relationship, in terms of guidance, in terms of help. But this time, no. He wants to, Lehisrachek Milot. He wants to go as far away as possible. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. Sheyatza alav shem ra sheba'a benosav. The reputation that Lot had gained now that he committed this act of incest was too much to bear. Avram didn't want to be associated with that for whatever reason, either because he realized Lot had really parted ways and destroyed a bridge between them, or because it was damaging his efforts to attract people to monotheism. So long as he was connected through familiar ties to Lot, people would say, oh my gosh, Lot, that's awful. Avram, that's awful. I want to have nothing to do with him. Maybe it was hurting Avram's ability to reach out. So you might connect the two interpretations of Rashi and say, the reason why the Shem Ra against Lot was hurting him is because his whole goal was to reach out to people. And if that was hurting his efforts, he was going to distance himself, not just physically, but in name as well, in association as well. You might have said that, or perhaps you don't have to connect the two pieces of Rashi, but they're two interpretations that stand on their own. What I will say is I think that the second interpretation is building off this word misham, right? There's two reasons why a person travels or why a person moves. Sometimes you're moving to get to somewhere, and sometimes you're moving to get away from somewhere. So according to the first interpretation, Vayisa Misham, Avram is leaving because he has better pastures to go for. He has better areas to be in, more effective areas to be in. He's leaving because he wants to go somewhere. According to the second interpretation, it's not that he has great goals of reaching another place. It's that he wants to leave where he is. He wants to get away from where he is. And I think that comes from the superfluous word misham. Pasuk could have just said, Vayisa Avram Arsa Negev. Avram sets his eyes on new pastures and he travels to the Negev. But it doesn't. It says, Vayisa Misham. He leaves there. He travels from there. That Misham indicates that it can't just be that Pasku Ha'ovrim V'Shavim Nasa Lo Misham, that he chooses to go elsewhere, but it has to also be L'Hisrachek Milot, that he specifically wants to get away from where he is. And they're not mutually exclusive, as I just mentioned. They might go exactly hand in hand, or at best, they don't go hand in hand. At worst, they don't go hand in hand, but they're not necessarily mutually exclusive as well. They could be two parallel reasons for his travel. Number one, there weren't people there to attract, and number two, he didn't want to associate himself with Lot anymore. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Rabbi. You too.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you,
Okay, take
Rabbi.
care.
Be
Be well,
good.
everyone.
Thank you.